Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. HTM here with some PTS patch notes for you guys. Starting off the Lost Depths DLC and Update 35. We have a lot to talk about this week, and so I'll be breaking this up into several videos. Make sure you're subscribed for those, but in this first one, I want to tackle item sets, specifically some powerful new sets that are getting added in this DLC, as well as changes to existing item sets, and of course mythic items. We'll be talking about the Oakensoul ring changes, because it did get some changes this patch. But I want to start off with the new sets. These are from the two new dungeons in the Lost Depths DLC, starting with Earthenroot Enclave. This has 3 new sets plus 1 new monster set. We have the light armor set, Grave Inevitability, Max Magicka, Healing Done, Max Magicka, and again. And then when you heal with an area effect, you apply Minor Berserk and Minor Resolve to heal allies for 4 seconds. If a healed ally already has Minor Berserk or Minor Resolve, you will restore 550 Magicka. This is obviously a healer set. Looks pretty decent. Should be easier to apply those buffs than using Combat Prayer, especially if you have really big AoE heals like a Templar, for example. And we have the medium armor set here. It gives you 2 bonuses for offensive penetration, 1 bonus for crit chance. And when you deal damage with a heavy attack, create 12-meter area for 12 seconds that grants Empower to allies inside, increasing their light and heavy attacks, and this effect can occur once every 8 seconds. I think what we'll see with this set and with other sets especially, as I've been looking this over, is that light and heavy attack weaving is still going to be a big part of the game. It's still very important for things like proccing sets. Certain skills are going to have you use it. So I think we'll see that a lot across the board. A lot of, especially these new sets, have some proc condition with light and heavy attacks. Just something to keep in mind. And then the heavy armor set for this dungeon, we have max stamina, max magicka, maximum health. And when you deal direct damage to a taunted target, you're going to restore 525 stamina and magicka once every 2 seconds. That's a pretty good amount of sustain, I would say. Finally, the monster set, the Archdruid set, gives you offensive penetration, and when you deal damage with a heavy attack, after 1.2 seconds, deal shock damage to up to 6 enemies within the 7-meter cone of your target. This applies major vulnerability for 7 seconds, increases their damage taken by 10%, and the effect can occur once every 15 seconds. So I don't know what the damage tooltip is on this yet. It's going to be based off the higher of your weapon or spell damage, but a pretty easy way to apply major vulnerability, sort of like the Turning Tide 5-piece set, but this is now in a monster set, so this will definitely free up some build possibilities, especially for tanks. Looks pretty good. Okay, the second DLC dungeon here, Grave in Deep. This is like the underwater dungeon, which looked pretty cool. A Grave Inevitability is a light armor set, gives you critical chance, weapon and spell damage, critical chance again. And when you deal damage with a light or heavy attack, you grant a stack of remorselessness for 5 seconds, up to 5 stacks. And when you have 5 stacks, you generate an aura of focus, granting you major force. This increases your critical damage by 20%. While you have the aura of focus, allies within 12 meters of you gain minor force. That's a 10% critical damage buff. So this is actually a really nice set, not just for healers and support builds, but for solo builds, even on-demand major force, just 5 light or heavy attacks there. So this could maybe replace Zogvin's, for example, especially if you have easy access to minor force. This is actually a lot more desirable now once we talk about the changes to the Oakensoul ring, which we'll see in just a few minutes. But this one, the light armor set here, definitely nice. Phylactery's Grasp, the medium set, gives you weapon and spell damage, critical chance times 2, and then on light attack critical damage, you apply Withered Soul, dealing disease damage over 10 seconds. Light attacking, critical damage, light attack again, will restore 575 stamina. And you can have that happening in that 10-second duration. So you summon the Withered Soul, and then critical light attacks, once that effect are active, restore stamina. So basically a sustain set for like stamina DPS build. Looks okay, not amazing, but decent way to sustain if you need it. Pangrit Den Mother is the heavy armor set. This is healing taken, armor, health recovery, a bonus to maximum stamina on the 5-piece. That's always nice. Then when you block, you and 3 group members are going to gain minor courage for 10 seconds. This effect can occur every 5 seconds. Okay, not bad. Decent way to gain minor courage, I guess, for you and your group. And then the monster mask for this dungeon, you fought a gatekeeper, gives you stamina recovery. Then when you use roll dodge, you create a Hadolid husk. And while within 5 meters of the husk, it will absorb all direct damage attacks against you. For 1 second, the husk explodes, dealing poison damage. Okay, and this effect can occur once every 20 seconds. So it absorbs all damage, all direct damage attacks against you for about 1 second. And then it has a 20-second cooldown. So I don't know, that seems like a little bit lackluster as far as just a 1 second effect for a 20-second cooldown. I mean, that is powerful. I wonder if a tank would use that, though, because it's only 1 second. Interesting concept, though. Now, in addition to the new DLC dungeon sets for PvP content, we have new sets for rewards of the worthy. So let's check those out really quick. Looks like there's 3 new sets, 1 light, 1 medium, 1 heavy. So Langor of Periite is the light armor set, gives you weapon and spell damage, crit resist, offensive penetration, and then you deal 6% increased damage to blocking players. When you deal light attack damage to any enemy that is immune to crowd control, you apply Langor for 10 seconds, reducing their magicka recovery and stamina recovery by 248. Okay, that's a pretty interesting debuff. Also, you get the 6% increased damage to blocking players. That's a pretty interesting set. Medium armor here, we have Nocturnal's Ploy. This gives you offensive penetration, crit resistance, stamina recovery. And when you apply a major debuff to an enemy, you remove a major buff with a duration from the target. Okay. Interesting. And then when you apply a minor debuff to an enemy, you remove a minor buff with a duration from the target. These effects can occur once every 2 seconds. Okay. Another debuff set for PvP. That's interesting as well. And then Mara's Balm is the heavy armor set. This gives you armor, crit resistance, healing taken, and whenever a negative effect is removed from you, restore about 2k health. When you take damage and have 6 or more negative effects, cleanse all negative effects. This can occur once every 15 seconds. Okay. Interesting heavy armor set. All right, finally, let's get into set changes. There are a lot of interesting updates here for Update 35. Again, this is going to hit end of August for PC, early September for consoles. This is just week 1, so things could change further on in the PTS cycle, but these are what they're looking to change in the upcoming patch. Now, first for traits, the charge trait was reduced. They reduced it down to 365%, down from 480. So that's a sizable nerf to charged if that's what you were using. The comment here was that this trait was beating out other traits, even if you were only using 2 status effects on your build. So that is pretty powerful. The new value should now have this trait much closer in power to other traits. So something to keep in mind if you're running charged. You do have some changes to arena weapons. Things like Grand Rejuvenation has an increased duration. Merciless Charge, which is the 2-hand VMA weapon. This has an increased duration as well. And a damage reduction. And this is something I'll be addressing in probably my next video, but we will see longer durations on most effects coming in Update 35. And then some reduction in damage. So that's not specific just to this weapon. You're going to see that across the board. Any dot, for example, is going to be about 20 seconds in total duration. Usually they now deal damage every 2 seconds instead of every 1 second. And most of them have had their damage cut because obviously they're longer duration. So they need to balance the damage. But that's just something to keep in mind. Now some dungeon and arena set changes. Blood Moon, this set now increases the damage of your light attacks by 2050 rather than a % bonus. Iron Blood, this set now grants major protection, major Aegis, and minor protection for 10 seconds when it activates, rather than reducing your damage taken by the unique 30% that it offered. So that's a pretty big nerf to this set if you're using this on a tank build or for PvP, for example. Now, a lot of those buffs you already have access to, so this isn't, that's a major nerf for this set specifically. Though they did reduce the snare on this down to 25%, so that's not bad. They also reduced the cooldown to 10 seconds, which if you take into account the active, it looks like you have about 100% uptime on Iron's Blood now. You can read the comment here. When we did the major and minor balance pass years past, we intentionally left this set alone to make sure the curse aspect of this set was justified, meaning the snare But we're seeing this set enable far too much mitigation with not enough penalty. So there you go, they've adjusted it back to major and minor buffs because of how powerful that extra 30% bonus was. Some additional changes here. Noble Duelist. This set now increases your damage done with light and heavy attacks by 2110, rather than increasing your weapon and spell damage. Savage Werewolf. This item set now procs off light attacks when you are in melee range of your enemy instead of light or heavy attacks from any range. This set now also ticks every 2 seconds instead of 1 to reduce situations where it could tick twice instantly. This set is just ridiculous on some specific builds in PvP. Completely broken, so yeah, probably a good change overall. Now this one I'm really interested to try out for myself. Sergeant's Mail. This set has been reworked now to grant a stack of Sergeant's Focus whenever you deal damage with a heavy attack, increasing your heavy attacks by 645 per stack up to 4 times. So the developer comments here say we're moving the focus of the set to be on heavy attacks to aid in flexibility. They want more builds to engage with it while also reducing its potential as a front-loaded burst set. So there are still, bonuses to heavy attacks in ESO and Update 35. They're leaving in the Empower bonus, for example, and they've talked about they want heavy attacks to still be viable, if not more viable, more powerful than they've been in the past. So I think Sergeant's Mail may be one of the best heavy attack sets moving forward, but I definitely will be doing some testing once the PTS goes live. Some changes here for Undaunted Infiltrator and Weaver as well. These are also heavy attack sets primarily. So those are going to give you a flat bonus rather than increasing your weapon and spell damage. Talk about the Oakensoul ring next. I'm sure most of you assumed there would be some changes to this. If you've been following the history of this mythic, you know it started as extremely powerful flat stat bonuses. It then got some major and minor buffs applied. It got even more major buffs applied, which is the current live version. And now in Update 35, this set now grants minor versions of the following buffs. So Courage, Berserk, Force, Protection, and Heroism, rather than the major versions. They now added a new buff, which is Minor Mending. That increases your healing. Healing done by about 8%, I believe. So let's go ahead and read the developer comment. The original intent of this set was to improve accessibility of 1-bar builds by providing many bonuses that you would get from running extra abilities on your back bar. Yes, this totally makes sense. I've talked about this several times. And a few other named sources that may come from coordinated groups to help make up for the flexibility and specialization loss of having 5 ability choices instead of 10. While we did see the suggestions we're incorporating now, I'm assuming they saw these earlier with the High Isle PTS. They didn't want to go too hard on the set after heavy nerfs to the original form without more concrete metrics and evidence, which we have gathered since Update 34 has launched. So basically, they've been looking at the performance of the set, who's using it, what content they're using it for. They now feel comfortable that the set will still be incredibly impactful for its target audience, but in a much more balanced way. So, too long didn't read. You're going to have less major buffs, specifically Courage, Berserk, Force, Protection, and Heroism. You still get the buffs, but it's going to be the minor versions of those, this is probably one of the outcomes that I expected the most. These buffs are generally a lot more accessible to, traditional builds, whereas the major buffs are just so powerful, you typically don't see those outside of like trials groups and, trial sets and things like that. Or if you do see those buffs, they have very short durations. You don't get them 100% of the time like you get with Oakensoul Ring. So all in all, I understand it's a nerf. I feel okay about it. I think, the fact that they're doing it this late, I know people are going to take that the wrong way. Like, oh, you did it to sell the chapter. You made it strong for the chapter release, and now you've nerfed it down for the next patch. Totally understand that sentiment. That definitely is something that a lot of players are going to be feeling, that put in the work to get this mythic. But honestly, when you look at these buffs, they're still extremely powerful. It's still extremely useful to have these on a 1-bar build. And for the type of content that I like doing usually, which is like solo dungeon runs and things like that, arenas, this mythic is still going to be powerful, and I will still definitely be using it on a lot of builds. So not unexpected changes, but definitely sad that they waited this long to make those changes. A couple of other more PvP sets to look at if you're interested. Dark Convergence has an increased cooldown now, 25 seconds up from 15. Hrothgar's Chill, this set's damage can no longer be blocked. And Plague Break got a ton of changes here. It now has a cooldown of 20 seconds per target. This set can now proc on multiple enemies from a single attack. And they reduce the damage over time by approximately 48%. But this damage can now critically strike. And they increase the damage of the explosion by roughly 3%. So there you go. Tons of changes to sets in ESO. Of course, there's many more changes in this patch. One of the biggest patches in ESO history, it seems like. So stay tuned right here. I will have several videos out this week covering all the changes, breaking them down so you can understand them and you know what's coming next. But as always, thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what you think down in the comments section below, and I will see you around in the next video.